going to read the next 10 pages of our book, Michael MORPURGO's My Friend Walter. Okay. And so we were. I sat in the front all the way, but I could not resist looking over my shoulder into the back seat. Sir Walter Raleigh was there. I could not see him, but I knew he was there. Somehow I could feel him, and more than once Auntie Ally had to open a window. I smell cigarette smoke, she said, tutting and shaking her head. Must have been Winnie. I never knew she smoked. It clings to the clothes, you know. Filthy habit. Never smoke, Bessie dear. You hear me? Never. Can't think of why anyone ever invented that filthy habit. Mother noticed it too, as I climbed into bed that night. Oh, better wash your hair tomorrow, she said, as she kissed me good night. Smells of cigarette smoke. Expect there were lots of people smoking at the party, were there? I nodded. Did you meet anyone interesting? Mindful of who was probably listening, I replied, just one. Who was he? He's called Walter, I said, and my mother went out. I heard her talking to Father in the passage outside the bathroom later. She met a friend called Walter, she said. Boyfriends already, said Father. Funny name, Walter. And their bedroom door closed. Are you there, Sir Walter? I whispered. I'm here. The voice came first, then the cloaked figure appeared sitting in the chair under the mantelpiece, where I kept my collection of china owls. Where are you going to sleep? I asked. Like your owls, ghosts don't sleep much, he said. He leaned heavily on his cane and stood up. Good night, dear cousin, and may God bless you always for your kindness to me. I shall not forget it. And he came over to my bed, took my hand, and kissed it gently. Good night, Sir Walter, I said. I am called Walter to my friends and family. You are indeed my family, and I trust you will always be my friend. Yes, I said, and my friend Walter walked out through the door and was gone as suddenly as he had come. Downstairs, Humph began to bark furiously and to scratch at the back door, and only I knew it wasn't the fox he was after. Chapter 3. Living with a ghost has its difficulties. I discovered, even if he is your friend. Of course I knew he would be as good as his word and not appear suddenly out of nowhere and frighten Gran half to death, but it was disconcerting to say the least, not to know if he was in the room with you or whether he was listening in. It would be, he said, far too tiring for him to show himself to me all the time, and it was true that if he appeared too often and for too long, he would become hazy at the edges. It seems ghosts need time to recharge themselves, so to speak. So between us, we had to devise a code, an exchange of signals. I would cough twice. That was to ask him if he was there, and if he was, he would open a door or drop something on the floor. Much to my disappointment, he never seemed to use china or glass for this. More often it was a pencil or a newspaper that fell casually off a table, to Humph's great delight. He would pounce at once and carry it off in triumph, either to bury it somewhere or to chew it into pieces in his basket. But if I wanted Walter actually to appear, I had to agree I would cough 4 times. It would work out well enough, we thought, just so long as I didn't develop a real cough. Of course, all this secrecy, all these signals, were really more for Gran's benefit than anyone else's. I didn't dare think what might happen if she ever found out about Walter. But find out she very nearly did. She couldn't walk very easily because of her creaky knees, as she called them, and she couldn't see very well on account of her reading too much in the dark when she was little, she said. But her ears worked perfectly, too perfectly at times, for it was Gran who said that she'd overheard me talking in my room one evening. I said I must have been talking to myself. She's always talked to herself, Gran, said Mother, ever since she was little. Bess has been telling herself stories ever since she could talk. You know that. Yes, but then I heard a man's voice, Gran went on. Clear as daylight it was. I probably had my radio on, I said. I'm quite good at thinking quickly when I have to. I didn't sound like a wireless to me, Gran said. and luckily an argument developed as to whether a wireless would be called a wireless anymore, or whether it should be a radio or a transistor, and the question of a man's voice in my room was forgotten. It was too close for comfort, though, so my friend Walter and I decided that in future we should talk in the house only in an emergency, and then always in a whisper. As it turned out, though, it was Humph, not Gran, who proved to be the greatest danger. Humph seemed to be able to sense Walter's presence whenever he was in the room, and he would stiffen, hackles raised, and set up a furious barking with an intermittent thunderous growling. Once or twice he even bared his teeth, something he has never been known to do before. No one could understand it. At first they put it down to the fact that Will was still away at camp, and that perhaps Humph was missing him. Mother became so worried that she called a vet, who examined Humph carefully and pronounced that he might have a middle ear infection, causing him to lose his balance and hear things that weren't there. So poor old Humph had to have drops poured down his ear 3 times a day. In the end, though, I managed to find a way around even this problem. I borrowed some scraps of meat from the larder, and I told Walter that the only way to Humph's heart was through his stomach, which was quite true. So now Walter would appear from time to time and offer him some scraps of meat, and of course he soon had him eating out of his hand. But I'm afraid this didn't work out exactly as I intended. Now whenever Humph smelt or perhaps sensed my friend Walter was anywhere near, he would wag his tail enthusiastically. Of course, that caused a draught, which would make Gran's ankles cold, and so he would often find himself inexplicably put out of the door. Poor Humph, it wasn't fair. Mother was delighted, though, with Humph's apparent recovery, and full of praise for the young vet. She went on and on about how clever he had been in his diagnosis. "Wait for the bill," was all Father said. Father seemed somehow preoccupied and sombre this time, quite unlike himself. I thought it was because Will was away at first. They got on like a house on fire, those two. They laughed at the same jokes and were always off rabbiting and fishing together. He liked me too, of course, but not quite in the same easy way, and I always wished he would. I didn't mind quite so much now because I had a friend of my own, but what a time we had, the two of us. It was like letting a bird out of a cage. Walter wanted to see everything, go everywhere, and do everything. First he wanted to go fishing, so I lent him Will's fishing rod, and we spent hours together down by the river that runs through the marsh field at the bottom of the farm. We'd been alone there just so long as I kept an eye out for the horrible Barrabills. We could talk freely. The Barrabill brothers, identical twins, farmed on the other side of the river. The horrible Barrabills, we always called them. Horrible because they were always shouting at us if they found us on their side of the river. They even fired a shotgun at Humph once to frighten him away. But horrible or not, they never came near Walter and me. Once Walter had mastered the complexities of Will's reel, he fished like an expert, delighting in every catch and cursing his devilish luck if he ever let off one off the hook, and that wasn't often. He built a small fire and cooked 2 of the fish in the hot ashes for me. I tell you, nothing has ever tasted that good to me before. But our fishing expedition got me into dangerous difficulties at home. It came as a bit of a surprise to Father when I brought back a bag full of sea trout. "What's come over you, Bess?" he said. "You've never shown any interest in fishing before." I could tell he was quite impressed, and he seemed for a moment to lift him out of his gloom. "I'll come down with you one night," he said. "River's just right for sea trout. Shy fish, your sea trout. Best to go after him in the dark, but I'm a bit tied up at the moment." And I saw glances exchanged between him and Mother. Something was wrong. I knew it was, but I had neither the time nor the inclination to worry about it. I was far too busy looking after my friend Walter. Next, he wanted to go riding. He insisted on it. I did my best to discourage him, because Sally hadn't been ridden for a while, and she could play up a bit with an inexperienced rider. "Oh, she can be awful wicked," I said. "She'll run away with you if you're not careful. She's done it before. And what if the horrible Barrabills see you anyway? You forget that we spirits have our ways, he said. All they'll see is a galloping horse. They'll not see me, not unless I want them to. And I'll not show them myself to anyone except you, remember? Walter showed himself more often these days. He said he found the country air invigorating, that it didn't tire him so much to show himself now as it had done in the tower. So no one saw Walter riding out on Sally except me, and I saw them both as they thundered past through the high thistles, with Walter bent low over Sally's neck, his cloak whipping about him. Herons and ducks lifted off in alarm as they galloped towards the river, and I could see from the way Sally moved that she was enjoying being ridden. She was collected and controlled. She was being ridden by a real horseman, and she knew it. Afterwards, we swam in the river together and lay on the bank in the sun. Walter smoked his pipe and talked as if he'd had no one to talk to for hundreds of years. I have had an eternity, cousin, an eternity now to think on the errors of my ways, and there were many and unforgivable. I see now, dear cousin, and for the first time, too, that my gravest error was ever to leave the farm and the countryside. Why did you leave then? I asked. I did not wish to, he sighed. I was sent away from home, as were all young men of rank in those days. I went to Oxford first, but I cared neither for books nor grey men of the cloisters who were my tutors, and I left for the wars. That's what a young man did if he wanted to make his mark in the world, and I wanted to make my mark, cousin. What do you mean? I asked. Walter wasn't always easy to understand, and he seemed to know it. I speak of ambition, cousin. Walter Raleigh had to be great in the land. He had to be powerful and rich and admired, and to be that he had to go to court. And so when I went to court, I was noticed at last by good Queen Bess, Queen Elizabeth, and she favoured me with her love and her attention. Was that when you spread your cloak in the puddle for her? I asked. He nodded and smiled. That was the start of it, I grant you. I was always one for grand gesture, so I became captain of her guard and was soon rich beyond dreams, as powerful almost as the Queen herself. Truly, cousin, the world was at my feet. Then I met and married Bess Throckmorton, your ancestor, and my dear wife, and she won my heart. She was suddenly more important to me than all the world, all the gold, and all the glory. But the Queen would not have it. There you go. So that's the next 10 pages. I'll read some more over the holidays, so hopefully we'll finish our book before next term starts. All right? Missing you. Be good. Speak to you soon. Bye.